So just first up, yeah, welcome everyone back. We're now on the fifth reading session of the Mencius. And for people listening in at home or watching on YouTube or BitChute, you can go to the description box to get the full text of what we're going to be reading today, which is, I believe it's section 2B, right, Quan? I believe?
It's section 2A.
2A. No, we read that last week, 2A.
Oh, yeah, no, right. You're right. It's section 2B. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. 2B. So people can check that out. That'll be what we read today. And let me just do a little bit of a screen share here, and we should be right on track. Yeah. Okay.
I've shared the PDF in the chat if anyone wants to use it.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So, Quan, do you want to say any opening remarks, or do we just jump right into the reading?
Okay, it will take 1 minute.
Okay.
Today, it's a very special chapter because from section 2B2 and from section 2B8 to section 2B14 would be the relation of Mencius mishap with the Duke or King Swan of Qi when he used him as a cover to invade the state of Yan.
And
that's all.
Sorry, could you just remind us historically, what was this again? This event?
Yes, of course. Okay, so Mencius tried to create the philosopher king, but in 314 BCE, King Swan of Qi would use Mencius' prestige as the outstanding scholar of his generation as a covert political justification under moral pretext to invade the state just north of Qi called Yan, Y-A-N, and that the conquest succeeded, but a generation later, in 284 BCE, and Mencius was dead at the time, the country of Yan would have their revenge and would invade the state of Qi. Qi wouldn't survive to the invasion of 284 BCE, but from that moment, it would be a weak state till their final conquest by the Principality of Qin, which would create the first Chinese Empire in 221 BCE. So I want to mention it here because it resembles incredibly what happened to Plato with Dionysius of Syracuse or Dionysius of Syracuse in the same century, meaning the 4th century BCE.
Okay, thank you. That is useful. Okay. So, like last time, instead of just having many different voices speaking in a dialogue form, we'll do what we have been doing, which is one person speaks at a time over the course of, let's say we'll have two people in total today will speak. So the first person for 40 minutes or 45 minutes, the second person for the second 45 minutes, and whenever it's necessary, somebody else can read the side notes if it's important. So who would like to be today's starting reader?
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
All right. Book 2, Gongsun Chao, Part B. Mencius said, the timing of seasonable heaven is not as critical as the lay of the land, and the lay of the land is not as critical as the cord among the people. An army may encircle a city with an inner wall encompassing a mere 3 li square and an outer wall encompassing only 7, yet be unable to conquer it. Surely there will be points of such a siege where heaven's weather is fair. The failure in such cases is because the weather is not as critical as the lay of the land. Other times, though the walls may be high and the moats deep, the weapons and armor sharp and strong, and the provisions of grain plentiful, the defenders nevertheless abandon the city. This is because the lay of the land is not as critical as accord among the people. This is why it is said that retaining one's people is not a matter of setting up boundary markers. Securing the state is not a matter of high mountains and steep ravines. Subduing the world is not a matter of fine weapons and armor. Those who grasp the Tao receive the aid of the many. Those who abandon the Tao receive the aid of the few. Those who are aided by few will reach the point where even their families revolt against them. Those who receive the aid of the many will reach the point where the world submits to them. When a Junzi to whom the world submits is pitted against one whose very family has revolted against him, then the Junzi need not even go to war, for if he does, his victory is inevitable. Mencius was about to go to the king's court when an envoy arrived to convey this message from the king. I was planning to pay you a visit, but I am suffering from a chill and cannot risk being out in the air. However, I will hold court this morning, and I wonder whether I will be able to see you there. Mencius replied, unfortunately, I am ill and unable to go to court. The following day, Mencius went to pay the Dongwo family a condolence call. Gong Sun Chao said, yesterday you excused yourself on account of illness. Wouldn't it be ill-advised to go on a visit of condolence today? Mencius said, yesterday I was ill, today I'm well. Why should I not pay the call? The king sent an envoy to ask after Mencius's illness and a doctor to examine him. Ming Chongzi responded to their arrival by saying, when His Majesty's command was given yesterday, my master was ill and unable to attend court. Today he has improved a bit and has hurried off to the court, but I'm not sure whether his strength will allow him to complete the journey. He then dispatched several men to intercept Mencius on the road and implore him not to return home, but to rush to court. In the end, Mencius was forced to seek refuge for the night with the family of Jing Chao. Jing Chao said to him, the most important relationships a man must maintain are that between father and son within the family, and that between a ruler and subject beyond it. The keystone of the former is generosity, of the latter, respect. I have seen the king show respect towards you. I have not observed you showing respect towards the king. Mencius said, what sort of thing is that to say? No one else in Qi speaks to the king about humanity and right. Could it be that they do not think these are worthy ideals? In their hearts, they think, how could he be worthy of being instructed in humanity and righteousness? What disrespect could be greater than this? I would never presume to lay before the king any teaching that was not according to the Tao of Yao and Shun. There is no one in Qi who shows the king more respect than I. Jing Chao said, no, that is not what I mean. According to the rites, when one's father summons, one should respond without even pausing to assent. when one's ruler issues a summons, one responds without even waiting for one's horse to be harnessed. You were preparing to go to court, but when the king's summons came, you decided not to follow through. This would seem quite unlike what the rites prescribe. How can you say such a thing? Said Mencius. Zhengzi said, the rulers of Jin and Chu have wealth unequaled, but they may have it. I'll take my humanity. They may have their exalted rank. I'll take my righteousness. In what way am I their inferior? Would Zhengzi have said such a thing if it were not correct? Is it not then a valid Tao? There are three things that the world exalts: rank, age, and virtue. At court, nothing is more important than rank. In one's village, it is age that is foremost. But for nurturing an era and sustaining the people, nothing surpasses virtue. How would it be right that the king, because he possesses one of these three, treats with condescension someone who possesses the other two? So you see, a ruler who will truly accomplish great things will always have subjects he does not summon. If he wishes to consult with them, he will go to them. If a ruler's respect for virtue and joy in the Tao does not meet that standard, he is simply not a man with whom one may plan great things. Tang was a student to Yi Yin first, and only later did he relate to him as ruler to minister. That is why he was able to become a true king effortlessly. Duke Huan of Qi was a student of Guan Chang first, and only later did he relate to him as ruler to minister. That is why he was able to become a hegemon effortlessly. Today, the fact that in the world all the states are of equivalent size with the same poor level of virtue, so that none can prevail over any other, is simply due to rulers taking as ministers men whom they teach rather than men from whom they learn. In the case of Tang and Yi Yin, Duke Guan and Guan Chang, neither ruler dared to summon those ministers. Now, if Guan Chang could not be summoned, how much less one who would not stoop to be a man like Guan Chang? Scroll up there.
Sorry, just quick question on a technicality. These two figures who Mencius relates to as exemplars of wise rulers, Yi Yin and Duke Huan of Qi. These were real people. What period were they ruling in, and were they actually like philosopher kings who appreciated philosophy over being just obeyed?
Yes, absolutely. Tang was the first king of the Shang dynasty, so he was ruling around 1600 BCE, and Yi is his minister. And the Duke Huan of Qi, that's the Huan number one, because there will be a Huan number two later on in the same principality. So Huan number one was ruling in the 7th century BCE in the principality of Qi, precisely the principality of the Qixia Academy, and was helped by the famous Guan Zhong, who was his minister. And here is a very interesting context. It's meant said that those people, those rulers, were the teachers of the philosophers before they became a ruler, okay? And I would say that I can make a rapprochement with Western history. If you take Cardinal Mazarin, for example, from France, he was the teacher of the young Louis XIV before becoming his minister. So he was much more able to influence Louis XIV in his policies when the latter was in his young age. But I think you all know that Cardinal Mazarin died when Louis XIV was quite young. And from there, Louis XIV policy just became worse. A second Western example, which is interesting too, is Bismarck and the young William of Germany, or Guilhem of Germany, if you want. When Bismarck was the minister of his father, I think he was Emperor Friedrich III, and when Friedrich III died, he recommended Bismarck to the young William II. When in the first phase of his rule, Bismarck was the true thinking head, if I may say so, and Germany was on a good road, okay? And when he has been manipulated by the British Empire to get rid of Bismarck, it was the beginning of the end for Germany with First World War and so on. And here, I think that we have an excellent example of universal history where the ruler needs to be influenced by someone in whom he has perfect confidence. And usually the best way to create such an environment is that the philosopher would be the teacher of the future ruler. What to hope to accomplish with Dennis the Younger, but unhappily things did not happen as Plato wished. And here, Mencius would have the same thing with this one. And the section is talking about a breach of protocol by Mencius, and that breach of protocol was with the father of King Xuan of Qi, and that father that is not mentioned is King Wei of Qi, Wei, W-E-I. King Wei of Qi started to rule Qi in 356 BCE, the year Alexander was born, and he died in 319 BCE. And the king that Mencius would advise and that Mencius would happen to be used by that king as a cover would rule the principality of Qi between 319 BCE to 301 BCE. And the famous invasion of Yan using Mencius as a cover happened around happened in 314, 313 BCE.
That's super useful. Thank you. All right. Okay, Jerry, you want to keep going?
Yes. Where are we?
2B3.
3. Okay.
Oh, is there any side notes? I don't think so, eh?
Well, yes, there are side notes, but my comments cover more than the side notes.
Good. Okay.
Okay. Chen,
And oh, sorry, Jerry, I did. Sorry to interrupt you. I did not mention the more philosophical dimension, but I will do it later on. And 1,000 apologies, Jerry.
okay. Chen said, when you were in Qi, the king presented you with 100 weight in gold, and you refused to receive it. In Song, you were presented with 70 weight, and in Chu, 50, and those you accepted. If your past refusal was proper, then the later acceptances were not. If the acceptances were proper, the refusal was not. Sir, you must acknowledge one or the other. Mencius said, I was correct in all these cases. In Song, I was about to depart on a long journey, and travelers must be presented a provisioning gift. The message sent with the gold said it was a gift of provisions. Why should I have refused it? In Chu, I was forced to take precautions for my safety. The message sent with the gold said that the ruler had heard of this and was therefore sending funds so I could arm myself. Why should I have refused it? But in Chi, there was no reason for the gift. To give someone a gift for no reason is to treat them as goods for sale. Whenever has there been a junzi for sale?
Hmm.
Interesting. Mencius traveled to Pinglu. Is that how you say it? Pinglu?
Pinglu.
Pinglu, and spoke with its governing grandee, Kong Juchen.
I think Pinglu was a city in the west of Qi.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
If someday one of your spear carriers thrice failed to appear in the ranks, would you dismiss him? I would not wait for a third time. Yet you yourself have failed to take your place in the ranks many times. In years of poor harvest and famine, the old and weak among your people topple into ditches to die, while thousands of able-bodied men scatter to the four quarters. This is not a matter I am capable of controlling. When a man agrees to tend another man's flocks of cattle and sheep, he must find for them pastureland and fodder. If he seeks for them but finds none, should he return the flocks to their owner, or should he stand and watch them die? Indeed, I am at fault. On another occasion, Mencius appeared before the king and said, among those of your men who govern your majesty's districts, I am acquainted with 5. Only Kong Juchen recognizes his faults, and he recounted his conversation. The king said, indeed, I am at fault.
Okay, I don't quite get the universality in that lesson. Maybe I was a bit dense.
I think I get the part about not taking the bribe.
Oh, that one's brilliant. Yeah, that a gift is not always good. Some gifts, if it has a good reason, then you should take the gift if there's a good reason. But if there's no reason, it's bribery. It's like buying the person. That's great.
Absolutely. And here we have a very central theme of Chinese philosophy. Beware of gifts.
Mhm.
Let's remind the Trojan horse.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to say something quickly on the 2 sections earlier. It entered my mind and I forgot. On the question of Mencius being chastised by, I guess it's a courtier or something for not responding to the king.
Which happened, yeah. Who happened to be his friend too?
And it was his friend. Okay. And his response was good. It was, saying that yes, I respect the rights, but I respect my humanity more. And I'm not going to treat the king, if I'm sick, I'm not going to just come to the king whenever he calls. And it's not a sign of disrespect. I'm actually, it's the greatest respect that I'm teaching him virtue and truth. And people who don't do that are actually disrespecting him more, even if they're obeying all of the rights. Part of that idea, I was reminded of, the story in the Bible, in the New Testament, when Christ enters in on a discussion where somebody, I forget the details, is being chastised for working on the Sabbath. and you're not supposed to work according to the rules on the Sabbath. And this person is doing something because they have to survive, and Christ steps in and basically intervenes, in defense of that person, getting at the point that there's a higher a higher humanity that has to come before any rules or rights that are part of our traditions. So I just was reminded of that.
And I want to read the last line of that section. Whenever has there been a junzi, a gentleman for sale? And I want to remind Professor Robert Eno's introduction when he talked about the fact that many of those wanderer persuaders were precisely for sale, and that the Confucian school distinguished itself by the pretension that they have a very high priced diamond to sell, and they won't sell that diamond to anyone.
Good.
Okay, you want me to continue?
Sure.
Okay. Mencius said to Chi Hua, "You resigned your post in Ling Chu in order to become chief judge, and it seemed appropriate then, since she would thus have opportunities to give advice to the king. But that was months ago. Could it be that no opportunity to give advice has arisen?" Chi Hua remonstrated with the king, but the king refused his advice, and Chi Hua had to resign his office and leave the court. People in Qi began to say, "Mencius gave fine counsel to Chi Hua, but we seem to hear nothing of counsel he gives himself." Gong Duchi reported this, and Mencius said, "I have heard that a man who holds office resigns it when he cannot fulfill his charge, and an advisor gives up his role when his words are ignored. I have neither office nor advisory responsibilities. So when it comes to whether I remain or leave, I have plenty of leeway to decide what's best, don't I?" When Mencius served as a minister in the state of Qi, he went to Teng as part of an official entourage of condolence. The king appointed Wang Huan, the grandee who governed the district of Qi,
Ke, like a K, Ke.
Ke, to facilitate the mission. Wang Huan called on Mencius morning and evening, but even as they were en route back to Qi from Teng, Mencius had yet to discuss with him any matter pertaining to the mission. Gongsun Chao said, "The position of minister to Qi is not a minor one, and the road between Qi and Teng is not short. We are on our return journey. Why have you not discussed with him any matter pertaining to the mission?" Mencius said, "The fellow has already handled everything. What is there for me to discuss?"
Okay, and the two side notes are Mencius came to be designated as a high advisor to King Xuan. Well, yeah, Quan told us that. Okay.
And you notice that he was being appointed in 315 BCE, and the next year, 314 BCE, he was being used as the decoy by the same king. So the treason came quite fast.
Did he immediately resign as soon as the invasion happened?
Yes, he resigned in the days following the event.
Okay. Mencius traveled from Qi to attend to a burial in Lu. On the road back, he stopped at Ying. Chang Yu asked him, "The other day, not realizing how unworthy I am, you requested that I supervise the coffin maker. In the press of events, I did not presume to question you, but now, if I may presume to ask, it seemed to me that the timber was rather too fine. In earliest times, there were no rules concerning the inner and outer coffins, but in mid-antiquity, the thickness of the inner coffin was set at 7 inches, with the outer coffin matching, and this applied to all from the Son of Heaven down to the common people. This was not a mere matter of aesthetics. Only in such a way can the feelings of the heart be fulfilled. If sufficient wood could not be obtained, one could not feel satisfaction. And this was also true if one could not afford the wood. But if the wood was available and one could afford the wood, and one could afford it, the ancients all followed this rule. Why would I be any different? Moreover, does it not provide comfort to the heart to ensure that no dirt will soil the skin of the deceased? I have heard it said that the Junse will not skimp on the funeral of a parent for all the world.
Okay. Do someone read the side note?
Ryan, you want to do that?
Yeah, sure. So 2b7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This passage concerns the events referred to 1b16. Confucians, as masters of ritual, were expected to be punctilious. Okay. Punctilious.
Punctilious.
Punctilious. Okay. First time I hear this word,
Yeah.
punctilious.
Yeah, it
with
means
regard-
it means to be very, very detailed, to be
okay.
very cautious.
It comes from punctual, maybe?
Exactly, but in the
Okay.
sense more to be very, very, very serious in your work.
Okay. Okay, cool. We're expected to be punctilious with regard to important ceremonies, and the burial of parents was, perhaps, the most solemn of all ritual observances. The question of Mencius's conduct here would have been regarded as an extremely serious matter.
Yes. I think here we are at the center, at one of the centers of Confucianism. Okay, because let's not forget the 3 corners of ethical conduct is first to be aware inside and to be also aware on the outside. Okay, so in ancient China and even to a certain extent in Asian culture nowadays, people are very punctilious precisely about the external observances of which are supposed to reflect the internal order. And what might seems to be a little bit things that could be dismissed nowadays, at the time were very serious matters.
Do you mind giving like a few examples of certain matters that you think maybe in the past were taken much more seriously?
Okay, for example, money was not everything. Okay, in the Lunyu, in the Analect of Confucius, when the disciple of Confucius, when his favorite disciple Yan Hui died, the other disciples tried to give him a lavish funeral that with symbols and offerings that were considered at the time beyond his rank. Okay, and Confucius was very angry with that, because he said to his other disciples, "Are you trying to trick heaven?" Okay, Yan Hui was not a minister. You gave him the lavish burial of a minister. Do you think that you will trick heaven? I just want to bury him as his teacher and his father. And I want to keep my humaneness by treating my favorite disciple as a son and as a disciple, and not disguising him as a minister, which who he was not a minister precisely. So, in the sense that it might look a little bit harsh for us, but in ancient times, if you were not a minister, and even if you have the money to have the burial of a minister, it's look a little bit ridiculous into the eyes of the old people 2000 or 2500 years ago, because it's not appropriate. Okay, what is outside has to be in harmony with what was inside. And nowadays we are more relaxed with those things. Okay, our line of reasoning most of the time, if that person has the money for that, why not? If you know that in Afghanistan, for example, the medals for soldier for meritorious soldiers are being sold on the Kabul market for $5, for example. That kind of thing were not approved at all at the time of Confucius and Mencius.
Oh, interesting. And what was back then? I think it was in China, whether or Greece, like there were landowners, and that's where they got their wealth from, right?
Yes, exactly. Like as on most of the planet at the time, you have the kings, the aristocrat, the princes, and of course, because most of the society at the time were agricultural, the main source of wealth, of course, was land owning, obviously. And at the time of Confucius, began to be developed a class of rich merchant too.
And of course, the landowner was a heritage, so you'd inherit your lands, and money was bequeathed through heritage, and not as much through through your own labor, let's say.
You can get land as a reward for services to the state. Okay, if you are a soldier, for example, you would have a small parcel of land as service. Anyway, all peasants had a parcel of land at the time, but they had to pay a kind of tax to the landlord. And if the landlord is a good one, the amount of tax be a reasonable one. Okay, meaning that you have a living wage, if we use a modern expression for that. Okay, but of course, if you don't have a good landlord, abuses can be quite cruel.
Okay, interesting.
And that's why the new class of merchant were perceived a little bit. I think it's the same movement of universal history. Okay, in the 17th century and 18th century in the West, what happened is that the landlords had competition with the international merchant. Okay, in China, in East Asia, those merchants existed since the time of Confucius, is not before. But the mentality always gave to the princes the capability to crush these merchants, or at least to prevent them to become as powerful than the merchant in the West.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Does somebody else want to pick up the reading?
Sorry, Matthew.
Yes, sir.
From 2b.a, we are beginning to enter in the famous geopolitical cover by King Swan of Qi. Okay, so
Ooh.
2b.a to 2b.14, those 7 sections concern that clash between the philosopher and the king.
Oh, good. Great.
If you want, I'll read.
Please do.
Shentong asked Mencius in private confidence, do you think Yan ought to be attacked?
Wait, sorry, just
Mencius-
Shen Tong is another counselor, or
Exactly.
Okay.
It's another counselor and, let's say, not close friend, but acquaintance of Mencius.
Okay.
Mencius said, yes, Sikwe had no authority to give Yan away, and Sishi had no authority to receive it from Sikwe.
I'm sorry.
Let's-
I'm so sorry. Zishi and I
Yes.
can't
No,
Zikwai.
it's me who present my apologies. I should have given a brief introduction of 3 minutes about the characters. Okay.
Okay.
So Yan is the principality just north of Qi, and Zikwai is the sovereign of Yan. Okay, and Zichu is a minister of Yan. For strange reason, maybe he has been manipulated or he had some mental disease that we don't know. 24 centuries later, he decided to give his kingdom to his minister Zichu rather than to his own crown prince. And because of that inner turmoil in Yan, King Xuan of Qi thought that it was a good occasion to invade Yan because of the lack of cohesiveness in the Yan nation at the time, because the people of Yan were not very happy that Zhu Kui decided to give his kingdom to a minister rather than to his own son, the crown prince.
Okay.
Mencius said, yes, Sikwe had no authority to give Yan away, and Sishi had no authority to receive it from Sikwe. Let's say there was a gentleman here whom you liked. What if you, without consulting the king, privately granted to him your court rank and salary, and he accepted them without any commission from the king? What difference is there in the case of Yan? The armies of Qi attacked Yan, and someone said to Mencius, is it true that you urged Qi to attack Yan? Never, said Mencius. Shentong asked whether Yan ought to be attacked, and I said yes in response to his question. Then they went off and attacked Yan. If he had asked me who should attack Yan, I would have replied, he who acts as the agent of Tian should attack Yan. Let's say there were a murder here and someone asked, should this man be executed? I would say yes. If he asked who should execute him, I would reply, the chief judge should execute him. As it is, this is simply one Yan attacking another Yan. Why would I ever urge such a thing?
Okay, I would like to make a pause here. I would like to be sure that everyone understand the historical context and the moral context. Does anyone want to start the discussion? Either on the historical or the moral context, because here we have a big thing to discuss, or many big things.
I would just say the one little thing that I'm probably nitpicking on is that in defense of the king of Qi, if I was to ask my advisor, should I go attack some neighboring kingdom, and the advisor said yeah or no, because No, he said, oh, that was the question, right? He said, should it be attacked? And then Mencius said, yes, it should be, but he didn't say the king of Chi should be the one to do it. It's still a bit ambiguous. That being said, no, I don't really know the context.
Okay, because here we have many moral tenets who are at stake, okay? Because let's not forget that Mencius had the pretensions to be the teacher of the King Xuan of Qi, and he wanted him to be a true gentleman, or in this case, a true king, because he's king. And here we have a neighbor that is in a situation of division, okay? Zhu Kuai, the sovereign, decided to give his kingdom to a minister, Zhu Chu, instead of his own son, the crown prince, okay? The question is, does the king have the right to forget his ancestors and to give the kingdom to any stranger? Or does he need to obey the ancestral line? That's one thing. The other thing is from the standpoint of the king of Qi. Seeing that his neighbor is in a difficult situation, is it the behavior of a gentleman to take advantage of it and to invade the country? Of course, if you reason from an oligarchical standpoint, the answer is obviously yes. We will take advantage of their weakness and we will conquer them, okay? But let's not forget that Mencius was at the beginning of the Warring States era. The aristocratic or the gentleman code of behavior were still lingering a little bit, and some were truly convinced by that, and some were using it as a hypocritical cover, okay, like the King Xuan of Qi, because he did not dare to invade directly Yan, because he had an oligarchical reasoning. He, in his mind, he thought, since our northern neighbor is in a state of division, I'm going to take profit of it. But he still needed to use the outstanding Confucian scholar of his generation, Mencius, as a cover. So we see there that the old code of gentleman conduct was not strong enough to impose a true action in link of it, but was still strong enough so a king feel obliged to use a scholar hypocritically as a cover for his oligarchical reasoning.
On the matter of is it right to break the first question, breaking the tradition of passing on the power to your son? I mean, that one's a bit relative in my mind. I mean, if the son is obviously rotten to the core, it's probably there's probably justification to break protocol and give the power to somebody who you think is more honorable. That being said, that was probably not the case in this circumstance, I would imagine.
As usual, Matthew, you show always that you are a brilliant person capable to guess the right answer. Exactly. In this case, the son was a worthy person. That's why the people of Yan was not too happy with the decision of Zhu Kuai.
But then, Quan, how would that justify the neighbor invading if the neighbor, assuming maybe this changes, but if the neighbor is taking over the nation instead of restoring the son if they thought he was the rightful heir?
That was the oligarchical cover. It was the excuse of King Xuan of Qi. Okay, he used that excuse that the crown prince was precisely an honorable person, and he wanted to restore him to his rights. But of course, it was not true. He invaded Yan because he wanted the land of the Yan nation.
Okay, should I continue?
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing first?
Of course.
Because it kind of reminds me that when Shen Tong asked Mencius, the king of Qi, they had already made up their mind. They wanted to invade Yan. They were just looking for some excuse. So I think he deliberately asked that question of Mencius in that way. He could have asked him, should we invade Yan? But instead, because he knew what Mencius would reply, he said instead, should Yan be attacked? So he was playing this game just to find some way he could say, Mencius said we should attack Yan. We can do it. I think they'd already made up their mind they were going to attack it no matter what. And Shen Tong was just trying to, kind of sneak around it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that sometimes I'm a little bit far-fetched when I want to make rapprochement with the modern world. But it reminds a little bit Afghanistan and 9/11, more or less.
Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Wow. I think that in our group, we all know that 9/11, that Osama bin Laden was not the true reason why enduring freedom operations was started on October 7, 2001, 20 years ago, or almost 20 years ago. But 9/11 was used as a cover, like Mencius here was used as a cover.
Gotcha. Yep. All right, Bob, you want to pick it up?
The people of Yan revolted. The king said, I feel such embarrassment towards Mencius. Genja said, Your Majesty need not feel disturbed. Whom would you say was wiser and more humane, Your Majesty or the Duke of Shao? Ugh, what a thing to say. The Duke of Shao dispatched Guan Shu to oversee Yin, and Guan Shu, relying on the people of Yin, rebelled against him. If he knew this would happen when he dispatched Guan Shu, then sending him was not humane. And if he did not know, then he was unwise. Even the Duke of Shao could not exhaust humanity and wisdom, much less Your Majesty. I request permission to visit Mencius and explain this to him. When Genja visited Mencius, he said, What sort of man was the Duke of Shao? A sage of ancient times, said Mencius. The Duke of Shao dispatched Guan Shu to oversee Yin, and Guan Shu, relying on the people of Yin, rebelled against him. Is that not so? Yes. When the Duke dispatched Guan Shu, did he know this would happen? Asked Genja. He did not know it. Then do not even sages make mistakes? Mencius said, the Duke of Shao was a younger brother to Guan Shu. Was his error not a natural one to make? Moreover, when the Yunzi of old committed an error, he corrected his course. When a ruler errs today, he persists in his error. The error of the Yunzi of old was like an eclipse of the sun or moon. The people all observed it, and when he changed course, they all admired him for it. Nowadays, rulers not only persist in their errors, they make excuses for them.
Okay. I would like to read the side notes, okay, because it will explain the historical context. So soon after the King Wu overthrew the Shang, 1046 BCE, he died. So King Wu died in, according to most historians nowadays, in 1043 BCE. So very soon after the conquest of the kingdom of Shang. His son, King Cheng, was a boy, and the Duke of Zhou, King Wu's younger brother, assumed the role of regent, okay, for about 7 years. So from 1043 BCE to 1036 BC. All the brothers led by Quan Shu. Quan Shu is another brother, okay, because Shu in Chinese mean, well, Shu to be precise in Chinese mean uncle, but in this precise context it means royal uncle. Quan Shu was sent to in the east, resetting the Shang people, so the conquered people of the former dynasty of Shangying, suspected the Duke of a coup d'etat, and they revolted. The revolt was only suppressed after 3 years. The Duke of Zhou acted as regent for 7 years, so 1043 BCE to 1036 BCE, and then gave up power in order to allow King Wu's son to reign without challenge. Okay, King Cheng, and that King Cheng will rule for almost 30 years, the second king of the Zhou dynasty. For these and other reasons, the Duke was regarded as one of the great sages of history by Confucians. Another thing that is worthy to be known about the Duke of Zhou is that his son would be the founding prince of the Principality of Lu, and that Principality of Lu is the principality where Confucius was born almost 4 centuries and a half later in 551 BCE. So the Principality of Lu being founded by the son of the Duke of Zhou was a place where the rights and the code of gentleman conduct created by the Zhou dynasty was especially well preserved. That's why Confucius had the chance to be born in that principality and to be more or less the spiritual offspring of the Zhou dynasty, even if by blood he was a scion of the Shangying dynasty.
Thank you.
No problem.
This is what's so great about having you around, Quan. I mean, to be able to read a philosophical document with the richness of the geopolitical environment of the times, the history, it's so valuable. And in my experience in university, you never get this. If it's done in a really incompetent way. So this is very, very valuable.
Yes. Well, once again, that is why Rising Tide Foundation has my favorite, meaning that you have to take into account the geopolitical reality and the philosophical tenets, because both goes together.
Amen. Okay.
When Mencius resigned his position at court of Qi, the king went to see him and said, "Having long wished for an opportunity to meet you, finally being able to serve with you at court has been a great joy to me. Now you're casting me aside to return to your home. I wonder whether I will have the opportunity to see you again." Mencius replied, "That is something I dared not presume to ask for, but is surely my earnest wish." On another day, the king spoke with Shi. "I would like to endow Mencius with a residence in the capital district, along with a stipend of 10,000 measures so that he can support disciples. He will be a model to the nobles and people of the state. Why don't you speak with him about this?" Shi conveyed the message to Chensi, requesting that he tell Mencius, and Chensi did so. Mencius said, "Just so. How could one expect Shi to understand the impossibility of this. If I were eager for wealth, how would I achieve it by resigning an office with a stipend of 10,000 in order to receive 10,000? Jason once said how strange Sishu Yi was. When he held office, if his advice was not accepted, he resigned, but had his son and brother serve as ministers. Who indeed does not wish for wealth and rank? But in the midst of wealth and rank, he chose to occupy a point of high ground outside. In the old days, men came to market to exchange the goods they had for the goods they did not, and officers merely supervised. But one vulgar fellow insisted on seeking out a point of high ground so he could observe all the traders in order to corner the market. Everyone despised him, and so they taxed him. The taxation of merchants began with that vulgar fellow. Mencius departed from Chi, lodged overnight at Shao. A visitor arriving wished to detain Mencius in Chi on behalf of the king. He sat with Mencius and spoke, but Mencius made no reply, merely leaning on his armrest and reclining. The visitor was displeased. I prepared myself with a day's fast before daring to come speak with you, master. Yet you lie reclining and do not listen to me. I beg your leave never to see you again. Mencius said, sit and I will speak plainly to you. In the past, had Duke Mu of Lu not always had a man in attendance by Cici's side, he would not have secured Cici's continued presence, while Shi Liu and Shen Xiang had to keep their men by the Duke's side, or they would not have felt secure about the Duke. You think you are asking on my behalf, but you do not even treat me as a Cici was treated. Is it I who am breaking with you, or you who are breaking with me?
Is there anything there, Quan, in the last two sections that we should have in mind?
Yes, but I will be very short, okay? Here precisely is the attitude that made the Confucian special compared to the other wanderer, persuader, or 有说就是, meaning that they wanted to make the rulers understand that what they have to sell is a very high-priced diamond and not just a technical skill. And that's another paragraph stressing that, because they had the pretension to teach kings to be true king.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he was offered a much sweeter deal than Plato was when Plato was sold into slavery by Dionysius II, whereas this king at least was offering him a ton of cash to start up his school, but it would have been on pretty morally compromised grounds, admittedly, if he had accepted.
Yes, and it happened repeatedly in Chinese history and in Asian history, okay? Meaning that men of high moral standing or outstanding scholars were perfectly aware that they can be bought to be used as a cover for less than commendable actions. And what happened with Mencius and King Xuan of Qi was a little bit the outstanding exemplar of that kind of twisted relationship.
As Mencius was departing from the state of Qi, Yin Shi remarked to someone, if he didn't realize that our king could never be a ruler like Tang or King Wu, then he is surely a very unperceptive man. If he did realize it and came to court anyway, then he's just a fortune seeker. He traveled 1,000 li to appear before the king. Now that he's met with no success, he's leaving. But he's been on the road for 3 nights and has only just got past the town of Shao. What's the point of this dawdling? It seems most distasteful to me. Yao Si reported this comment, and Mencius said, "What does this Yin Shi know of me? It was my wish to travel 1,000 li to visit the king, but how could it be my wish to have met with no success? I simply have no alternative but to leave. To me, it feels all too fast that after 3 nights, I've already left Shao. The king might still change his ways. If he did, he would certainly call me back. Only after I had passed Shao and the king had sent no message pursuing me did I feel the true impulse to return home. And even so, how could I simply abandon the king? He is still capable of turning to goodness. If he would only use my counsel, it would not merely be the people of Qi to whom peace would come, it would be the entire world. And the king might still change his ways. I look for it every day. How could I behave like those petty courtiers who remonstrate with their rulers and when their advice is not followed, stalk off frowning in anger and race all day to get as far away as possible before seeking an end? When Yin Shi heard of this response, he said, I am a petty man indeed. When Mencius was leaving Qi, Zheng Yu accompanied him on the road and asks, "You are wearing an unhappy expression, sir. Yet I have heard you say the Yunzi does not complain against Tian, nor does he blame men." Mencius said, "That was one time, this is another. Every 500 years, a true king should arise, and in the interval, there will always be ages famed for excellence. But since the time of the Shao founders, it has now been over 700 years. By the calendar calculation, it is overdue, considering that the times are like what the times are like. The world is ready. But Tian does not yet wish to bring peace to the world. If it did, in this generation, who apart from me could it turn to? Why should I be unhappy?" Mencius had left Qi and was dwelling in Shu. Gong Sun Shao asked, "Is it a traditional practice to serve at court without accepting a stipend?" "No," said Mencius, "but when I had my first audience with the king of Chang, I determined as I retired from his presence that I would ultimately resign. Not wishing to appear to be changeable, I never accepted my stipend. Then the war began, and it would not have been proper to ask leave to depart. It was never my intent to remain long in Qi."
It says here, side note, Shu was in southern Shandong near the small state of Cao and Teng. How do I pronounce that? Cao?
Yeah, perfect. So,
Okay. Where Mencius seems to have settled after leaving Qi. His departure was now complete. How long, what did Mencius do after he resigned in life? Did he just go into studies at that point, or did he continue trying to create a philosopher king?
Okay, so I would like to start from the beginning. Okay, so Mencius was born in the 4th century. Okay, so from that moment, 380 BC, or around 380, 390 BC, it's debatable, but at the beginning of the 4th century BC, for the 51st years of his life, he was a scholar and a teacher. In 325, he decided to have audience with King Hui of Liang, if you remember our first reading. And he remained at the court of King Hui of Liang for about 3 to 4 years, till the death of King Hui of Liang. And he was not impressed by the son of King Hui of Liang, King Xiang of Liang, who started to rule the kingdom of Liang, or of Wei, but the big Wei, because you also have a small Wei. So he was not impressed by King Xiang of Liang, started to rule in 319 BCE. So he moved to the east to the principality of Qi, and there he met King Xuan of Qi, and that King Xuan of Qi precisely started to rule Qi also in 319 BCE till 301 BCE. He discussed with that prince for 3-4 years, and he was a minor advisor till year 315 BCE. Okay, at that moment, as we read maybe half an hour ago, he has been granted a position of high counselor. And he kept that position for about a year till the scandal of 314 BCE, when he has been used as a decoy, as an excuse for the invasion of Yan. And he resigned quite rapidly. And after that, when he has settled himself in that city of Xiu in southern Shandong, he will remain a teacher till his death 15 to 20 years later. And it was almost a replay of Confucius' career, because Confucius also started his wandering persuasion in 497 BCE, and in 497 BCE he was born in 551, so he was 46 years old. Okay, so he started his wandering and exile maybe 10 to 15 years younger than Mencius, but from there there's an almost identical rapprochement between their careers.
That's amazing. That's really amazing.
Yes.
And or just remind me again, what's the name of the Confucian school? I always forget it, starting with the letter J in the east.
Jixia, Jixia. Okay,
Right.
and Jixia simply means under the gate of Qi. Okay, Qi is the name of the god of harvest in ancient China. Okay, and the gate of the capital city of the Qi principality, Lingzi, that gate on the western side was called the Ji Gate. Okay, so the academy near or besides the Ji Gate was called the Jixia Academy. And Linzi still exists nowadays, but it's not called Linzi, it's called Zibo, Z-I-B-O, and it's in Shandong, obviously.
Okay. All right. And this was tore down this academy at the beginning of the Qin dynasty, right? And it was then rebuilt or reconstructed in the Han dynasty period.
It was not constructed in the, well, there was a minor academy at Linzi at the time of the Han dynasty, but let's not forget that the capital city of the Han dynasty was in the west, okay, in the area of Xi'an nowadays. So there was a minor branch, if you want, at Linzi, but the major branch under the Han Dynasty was at the capital city of the Han Dynasty, Chang'an, okay, near present-day Xi'an. And that the original Linzi Academy became a kind of provincial branch, if you want. A little bit like during the Roman Empire, for example, the academy at Athens maintained its prestigious status, okay? But the ambitious and brilliant scholars, they wanted to go to Rome and not to stay in Athens.
I wonder if, because there's so many parallels, but also differences between between Plato's academy at Athens and the world he was living in, what we're reading about here. And I know from Cynthia's class and some stuff we had read, both during Plato's lifetime and afterwards, there is a lot of evidence of his academy playing a role in military strategy. Now, of course, the difference between Athens and its problems versus what China was dealing with was that Athens was contending with an external threat of the Persian Empire, whereas in China's case, it seems that its problems were coming internally more than anything else.
Exactly. Well, internally, we have to make a distinction here, okay?
Yeah.
Because let's not forget that at the time, the kingdom of Qi was an independent kingdom, okay? However, you are right, because China was still under the nominal rule of the Zhou dynasty, okay? So even if the sovereigns of the local principalities had political power, spiritually, they still consider themselves under the umbrella of the Zhou dynasty. In that sense, I agree with you, it's more an internal problem because Athens was a specific culture and the Persian Empire was another culture. But in the case of China, you have different principalities under the culture of Huaxia, okay, which is the name that the Chinese always call themselves since a high antiquity, because Hua means splendid and Xia is the name of the first royal dynasty, and it's also called as the civilized ones. Okay, so it's not very modest from the Chinese people, but Huaxia means exactly the splendid civilized ones. So it was everywhere the culture of the Huaxia, but with internal political division, which is not at all the same between two different kind of cultures as with the Greeks and the Persian. In that fundamental sense, you're right.
And were they as well involved with military strategy, the Confucian scholars, or were they more focused on the philosophy of governance, good governance?
Oh, in ancient time, a gentleman is supposed to be prolific or competent both in philosophical tenets and in practical skills, okay? And those practical skills include, of course, military competences. The only difference between a gentleman and a petty man, that is, a petty man will have an oligarchical reasoning and will think that might is right. And the gentleman will think that right is right and might is only the servant of right.
Right.
And that kind of distinction between military and civil will be, let's say, much more pronounced from the Song dynasty, okay, meaning almost 1,400 years after Mencius. But before the Song dynasty, the Chinese scholars were expected to be both skillful in philosophy and in the practical affairs, practical skills.
Mm. Would you say, and I feel like I'm hogging Kwan's mind. Does anybody else have a question or anything for Kwan before I throw another question out?
Go ahead, we're listening.
Okay. Jerry had brought up something at the beginning while you were working out your technical difficulties, which plays into a question I have regarding the brutality of life at the beginning of the Qin dynasty, and Jerry was bringing up that it's troubling to, look at the crackdown on the Confucian scholars and a lot of the other things that were going on at the time. And we were talking a bit about the brutality of the world in general during the Warring States period. From what I've seen, partially from listening to you and the past readings, but also the show, Qin Dynasty show that I'm watching, the legalism was a very valuable strategic way of thinking during this time, because it was about winning. Like, it was very effective at like being successful, and it utilized deceit. There's no moral qualms about like promising one thing and doing another and stabbing, breaking a treaty or whatever. And so it seems like in the world that they were living in, would you say that it would have been possible for the Confucian way, the Confucian Tao of being successful, if it had been done wisely, to succeed over the other 5 states, if any one particular state had really done it, or was that just not the time for that to work, the governing by benevolence and virtue and what have you?
You will find my answer a little bit strange, Matthew, but here is my hypothesis. Let's not forget that all the 6 states that have been conquered, meaning Qi, Yan, Chu, Zhao, Wei, and Han, they were older than the Qin principality. Okay, so my hypothesis that the process of corruption has been deeper in those 6 states than in the new states of Qin, who was younger, more dynamic. Okay, because the Qin did not succeed only because of their brutality. They succeeded also because they opened the possibility for commoners with talents and skills to be accepted in the new nobility based on meritocracy. So it's not, they were more brutal than the rest, of course, I agree with that. But it's not only that they were more brutal, they were also more meritocratic. They were also more capable to engage themselves in new adventures, for example, to create new canals of irrigation in order to increase the productions of rice and cereals to feed the population and to feed bigger armies. They were capable to create under meritocratic and legalist principles mass productions of efficient weapons. Okay, so there were a complex set of factors that were not necessarily only brutality. And I would say that the Confucian of the Han Dynasty used the skills that have been implemented, the skills and the institutions that have been implemented by the legalist school under the Han Dynasty, but that legalist frame of organizing the society was under the umbrella of Confucian philosophical tenets. Once again, there's nothing wrong with technical men, but those technical men are subordinate to gentlemen. That is the core and essential point.
Yeah, right. That's good. That's good. Young Hong agrees.
Yeah. And it's the same.
I'm impressed. That's it.
Yong Hong, I'm touched because she's the true Chinese. I'm only half Chinese.
It's not just about being a Chinese or Canadian. It's like it's being knowledgeable. Like at the beginning, when Matthew asked me the question about the historical details, I already made it very clear that I'm no historian. So the reason for me now, that's why I've been, trying to get a hang of this reading session. And gradually I got to understand more and more and the perspectives you guys are having. So for me, it's from a different perspective. And when I read the ancient classics. So for Quan, or maybe for a few, the focus more on the political point of view and also on the philosophical thinking. But for me, it's like I consider myself more as a practitioner of Confucius, of the follower of the teaching of Confucius. Yeah, just as at the beginning of the Analects, Confucius said 3 phrases, right? The first one is, it's so delightful to constantly learn and put what you learn into practice. So, and the second one, it's so delightful to see friends travel from afar. And the third one is not to get annoyed when you are, misunderstood when you are misunderstood by others. Only so you can call yourself a gentleman. So I know I'm no historian at all. But that's why I was a bit hesitant when Quan first invited me, and like I said, well, will I have any connections? How could I follow this reading session? Because those are not, even though that I follow the world news all the time, but I mean, geopolitics is far from my life, is far from my areas of interest. But I can still see the connections. So when I don't talk, it's not because I disagree, but I have to say that I'm very impressed by how knowledgeable Quan is, and how thoughtful you have been in asking those questions. Even for me as a Chinese, it has nothing to do with being a Chinese. Ask these questions to the 90% of the Chinese. I doubt they would have the precise answer like Guan does. So just to make this clear, okay? So I'm no historian. I can never think strategically, but I'm more like from the practitioner point of view. Yeah. Sorry.
Sounds like a reply that's worthy of Mencius.
Pardon?
It's a reply that's worthy of Mencius. Very humble, but we can see through your wisdom. We can see the wisdom there.
I'm much flattered. I would not call it wisdom. I don't have much wisdom, but I am a sincere
The wisdom
follower.
was in your response.
Thank you. I hope that you can tolerate that my different presence or different perspective. Mm-hmm.
You actually reminded me by bringing up the question I had asked you at the beginning. I'm going to ask it again since Quan is here, but yeah. It was on a technicality. It was on a detail in regards to, because Jerry again had brought up the Terracotta Warriors. And it got us into a conversation. It got me thinking about the practice of burying a lord or a influential person with their entire with their servants and or maybe even wives, I'm not sure, but certainly their servants, which was a practice for a long time, and it ended. And I was just wondering, did it end in a trickle gradually over time, or was there sort of like an edict or a decree where it was a break, where now we're not going to bury human beings with a king anymore, we're going to just, you know, find an alternative, whether Terracotta Warriors or I don't know, something else? Did it happen that way?
Young Ho?
No, I asked her. She said she needs you on the scene to help out.
Okay, okay, okay. She wants to play the modest person, but it's okay. I will play the non-modest person by giving the answer. So I think that there was a kind of edict with the first king of Zhou, okay, because human sacrifices was galore under the Shang dynasty, okay. And with the first Zhou king in 1046 BCE, there was a kind of proclamation forbidding human sacrifices. So theoretically, it stopped in 1046 BCE, but that's theoretically, because high-ranking people in the Western Zhou dynasty and Eastern Zhou dynasty, either spring and autumn or warring states period, still practice limited sacrifice when they die. Okay, for example, choose 1 or 2 consorts with maybe 3, 4, 5 servants with their favorite dogs and their favorite horse, rather than to have hundreds of people sacrifice at their funerals. Okay, so there was an improvement during the Zhou dynasty. Even in Confucius' time, high-ranking lords can be accompanied by 1, 2, 3 servants or favorite concubines in death. Let's say that it was truly terminated with the Han dynasty. With the Han dynasty, it was considered a serious crime, and even with the so-called brutal Qin dynasty, they began to stop those kind of practices. So I can say that it's reasonable to say that around 300 BCE, 250 BCE, that practice of ritual human sacrifices was truly terminated. So let's say 23 centuries ago. And the Confucian school played an immense role in that civilizing advancement, if I may say so.
Mm. Okay, thank you.
Ask a question of Juan, what I was trying to originally. I wanted to ask about the Qin dynasty, because from what I've read, some of it a long time ago, I don't remember where I read it, but it was obviously from a Western viewpoint, not from a viewpoint of people in China. But they did not speak very highly of the Qin dynasty. And from what I remembered, they were anti-Confucian, and there was book burning, and I don't know, maybe some killing of some of the Confucian scholars. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I had read earlier. I wanted to know if that was true or not. And the other thing I had read was about the Terracotta Warriors, where the Qin emperor had this whole army made, and then it was buried with him, so he would have it, you know, in the afterlife. But what I had read was that this was, how should I put it, very harmful for the economy of the Qin Empire, that too many people had been pulled away from, say, doing other things towards making these terracotta warriors, and that it was not, you know, it was not looked on as good either. But that's just what I read. And like I say, it's from a Western standpoint, so I'm not sure if what I read was right or not. But if you could comment on that, on the Qin dynasty, it would help me
Yes.
out.
Well, your question are very, very interesting. I thank you for your questions. I will start with what is the most scandalous, what they call in Chinese a keng ru shao shu, okay, meaning to bury the scholar alive and to burn the books. It happens in 213 BCE, so it was a true historical event. It was not invented by anti-Qin persons or anti-China person. It was real, but it has been exaggerated, okay? In the sense that, of course, the Qin emperor, the Qin Shi Huang, created the first Chinese empire in 221 BCE. Of course, it was obvious and natural that there would be revolts around the empire, especially from the noblemen of the former kingdoms, okay? And those noblemen, of course, wanted to restore their former kingdom. And what the first emperor burned was the annals, the historical documents of the former kingdoms. So he would discourage the former nobleman to stage revolts against him by destroying the evidence of the past glory of their kingdoms, especially from their archives and historical books. And it was he did not order a generalized burning of the book throughout the empire. Okay, that was truly exaggerated. He made an example in the capital city to scare the former noblemen of the former kingdoms who didn't want to join his new empire. But he did not burn the books of medicine, the book on agriculture, the book on military strategy. Everything that was useful for ordinary life was not burned, okay? It was only the annals, the historical documents of former kingdoms, because he wanted to erase the glory of those former kingdoms and to make his point. Now is the new empire, and talented men were invited to work for the unified empire and not to stay with the past glories that are no more. So it was very practical. It was not the act of a madman. Okay, and what is unfair, that it often is presented as the act of a madman, which was not the case.
Thank you, thank you. That clears that up. Okay.
And the other thing about the Terracotta Warriors, my answer is yes and no. Of course, they conscripted many able-bodied young men for that. So the answer would be yes. But no, because at the time of the first Chinese Empire, the Chinese population was around 20 million, okay? And that 20 million under the Han Dynasty would be multiplied by 3, because at the end of the Han Dynasty, the Chinese people would reach 60 million, which is 1/3 of the world population at the time. 1/3 was in China, 1/3 was in the Roman Empire, and the last third was scattered around the world, okay? Because the world population in year 0 was around 200 million, okay? And 1/3 in the Roman Empire, 1/3 in the Chinese Empire, and 1/3 in the rest of the world. But at the time of Qin Shi Huang in 221 BCE, the Chinese population was around 20 million people. And maybe there were about less than a million, probably in the order of 500,000 that have been conscripted for the mausoleum, okay? So it was a big number, but it was not serious enough to stop agriculture or commerce and etc. So it was once again true in the sense that he took a lot of manpower for himself, of course. After all, he was the first emperor, but he did not stop the Chinese economy of the time because of that.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. I can keep my Terracotta Warrior now.
Don't be shy, Jerry. Jerry, I have one too.
Sure.
I have one too.
Jerry, don't be shy. I have one too. So
You have a big one.
Just, I'm just curious to know, may I ask a question
yeah.
for
Yeah, sure.
Gerald? Mhm.
Okay.
I'm just curious to know. Yeah. So, yeah, Kwon, of course, and, you know, like given his extensive knowledge, yeah, he could verify the historical facts with such confidence. Okay. But so what's the point? And for you, why is so important? For example, tonight, if what Kwon said that, oh, what you read is absolutely true, or he just denied the whole thing that you read, and then would it make a difference in your life, in your thinking, and what's the impact? Just curious to know. Yeah.
Oh,
If he says something about, for example, the cruelty, you know, behind all those warriors, and do you really feel shameful to keep it, or will you just throw it away? Say, no, I won't touch it for moral or ethical reasons, or so. I'm just curious to know. Yeah.
well, the reason, to be honest, is because we get barraged by so much anti-China propaganda growing up. And then when you read, especially a lot of the work that Matt has done on the Belt and Road Initiative, and you say, that really sounds good. And so you go, well, maybe all this other stuff I've been taught about China, maybe it's not right. So I'm questioning what I learned a long time ago. And so when we're reading about Mencius, and it just reminds me so much of Plato, the way that they think. And I just, in the back of my mind, I had this thing about how I had read how the Qin dynasty was bad and they were killing people and burning books. And so you have this evil image of the first, you know, real Chinese dynasty. So if you have that, then what do you think of the rest of the history of China? So that was in my mind. So when you have people like Mencius around, how could it not have influenced in some way the Qin dynasty that came later? You couldn't have that big of a discrepancy. So in my head, I had this, you know, I wasn't sure which way. So I had to ask Kwon that because it would help clear things up. And I think it has. Maybe not just for me, but other people watching and that too have had the same problem. So
I just want to add that the bad reputation of the first emperor was primarily because of the Han Dynasty, not because of the Westerners, okay? Because the Han Dynasty being the winners, they portray the first emperor as the absolute tyrant, as a propaganda stunt of the time, okay? So propaganda did not start with CNN, let's not forget.
Interesting.
Thank you for your sincerity, Gerald. As it was always so delighted to get to know friendly Canadians. You know, even though I consider myself, you know, like Canadian in many ways, because Montreal has been, has become actually this city, the only city I live the longest. So for me, Montreal, Canada is already my native, like home and country, but it's still very delighted to see some warm and friendly friends like you. And Juan certainly made that clear to me, and I can certainly have that connections for tonight. But also from what you just said, it reminds me of something. And we always say that, like history is written by the winners, right? If you wish to find, hope to, or dream of finding truth in the history, I think it's a mere illusion. But it's like, for me, like it's like a recipe. Have you ever tried Chinese dumplings?
Yeah,
Oh, you
sure.
both, yeah. So for me, okay, I'm just, for me, all those actually are just like recipes for dumplings, right? So you talk about the recipes of dumplings, and then you listen to others explain the recipes of dumplings, right? So I think the more direct way to get to know China maybe is to make friends with the real Chinese, like me, right? We can make dumplings for you, right? So instead of just sharing recipes with you, because by sharing recipe, you can never eat it. You will never, like have a full stomach, right? But getting to know, make some Chinese friends, friendly Chinese friends, right?
Are you
the chance to eat dumplings. I'm good at making dumplings.
Yeah. Are you offering to cook us food? I accept.
Oh, I invited Juan to come to my place for food, but he likes his tea place too much, right? Juan. It's difficult to invite him out. But like me, if I'm here in Montreal, right? If I want to get to know the local culture, if I only read and then I read grammar, and then I try to learn French, but still, it is a tool to understand the real people and real culture, but it doesn't equal to real culture and real people. Sorry, I don't know why I had this comment. It just
no, it's good. No, it's a really good point.
I think you don't mind. Yeah, don't mind my spontaneous sharing.
It's one of the jobs I had before I retired. I was a cleaner at a school, and one of the teachers there, she was helping me learn Mandarin. So one day I asked her, what restaurant do you go to? I know Canadians go to these Chinese restaurants, but that's not Chinese cuisine. I want to know the restaurant that Chinese people go to. That's the one I want to go to. So she told me where to go. So I went to this one, and they had about 20 different kinds of dumplings, and you get to try one of them.
And so even among Chinese, right? Even among Chinese, like Chinese, right? So you have, like you make dumplings in different ways. So, but it's already, that's why I said I was touched, and I truly appreciate your sincerity, because questioning, I think it's the first step, leading to truth. If you don't even question what you read, like what you heard or what you learned from others, you will never. It's never possible for you to even get 1 inch closer to the truth. I was very touched by your sincere attitude. Actually, I think that's I got that message.
Well, it's the same with Canadians that I know Matt and myself. Are wondering, what is Canada? What's the history of Canada? And like you say, the history is written by the victors. So all of the history of Canada has been written by the British from the British standpoint. It doesn't tell you anything. So it's a project that I work closely with Matt on and also Pascal to try to get to the real history of Canada and not the one that's handed to us by, the British royal family. So it's that same, you have to be constantly looking to try to find the truth because it's there, it's just buried. You have to keep digging and try to find it. But it's the same thing that we've been working on, Matt and myself and others too.
Yeah, Jerry
it's
has
very ambitious.
Jerry has authored four volumes of Canadian history. One of them has been published in print. 3 more are waiting to be done soon. But it's
Wow.
some very interesting work. And Jerry, I'd ask you on this note, since Young Hong brought up the problem of the history books are written by the winners, which are not telling the truth. She also made the point that the pursuit of truth in history is a bit of an illusion. If you totally believe that, Jerry, I don't think you would have written the 4 volumes. But what would you say your method is? What do you think that is the important ingredient if you're not using the historical writings of the victors? How are you getting at your idea that you're publishing of what truthfully happened historically?
I don't mean to put you in such a position.
No, it's a good. No, it's a good.
That's
It's a
not,
good.
That's not my intention at all.
No, it's a
okay?
good question. I just wanted to
Matthew,
get.
you are too sharp. You are too sharp.
No, no,
And,
I
you
know
are
Jerry.
certainly a
I know
Canadian.
Jerry's got all sorts of interesting thoughts, and I wanted to get him since we're recording this. I figured it's useful for people watching to see what Jerry has to say about this because it's a great question.
I
forgot it's recorded. I
no, it's
shouldn't have said that.
No, you should. No, this is good. That's how. That's dialectic.
And-
That's what Mencius
Young
wants us
Hong-
to have dialogue.
And Young Hong, a copy will be sent to the Communist Party of China.
And you need a good translator and to translate it into Chinese. Otherwise, trust me, okay? So okay.
Well, when I first started, this has got to be 15 years ago when I was in Montreal, and we first started the Canadian History Project, as we called it. And you start things and it's not very good. But a man named Pierre Baudry read it and he sent me back an email, and the last line was, "Pay attention to the intention." And that's what I've used since then, that when I'm doing the research on history, I don't read history books because I find they're horrible. What I read are biographies. So you take an individual who played a certain point in history and you read it from his standpoint to try to find out what was going on in his mind, what was his intention, his reason for doing that. And then you can decide whether that reason was right or wrong. In most cases, it's not right or wrong because it's a combination of various factors at the same time. As Quan was saying about the Qin dynasty, there's all different ways to look at it to see why it came out. But I find if you look at biographies, you start being able to piece the story together. And especially if you find someone, like if you find a Benjamin Franklin, where it's just so obvious his understanding of what's going on historically at the time, it really gives you a way of judging other people around him. So I just read biographies as the best way to try to figure these things out. And it's hard, but you have to go to the original source. There's a lot of stuff on the internet now where you can get people's writings. Fortunately, in the old days, people wrote letters and they kept them all. So if you're able to get people's letters they're writing back and forth, you really get a good idea what they're thinking, as opposed to I find a history book has already made their intention. They've decided what their intention is of that book before they even write the first line. And then, usually they're paid. They're saying, oh, we're going to pay you to write a book with this intention. And then they proceed to write it. And that's why I don't like history books. I like biographies. So that's just been my standpoint, how I do it. It's worked for me so far. I hope that helps answer your question. But I like people. I don't like books, history books. People are so, one person, a book of a person is so complicated and so fascinating. Real characters, real intellectuals who understood what they were trying to do, their place in history. And that's what I try to find. And it's hard in Canada because they're rare, but they're there, but they're rare.
I would throw in touching on what you just said, and also the example of learning the formal rules of grammar of a language versus actually immersing yourself in a culture and making friends and eating their food and other things. There's this example that, because Plato even gives this example of knowledge versus right opinion, where you could have a right opinion by memorizing a map, but you could have real knowledge by actually taking the journey in the real world, which they might get similar effects. If somebody were to ask, like, how do I get to, I don't know, Ottawa by foot, from here, I might give, if I've never been to Ottawa, but I've memorized the map, I might give the right answer, but it's not real knowledge that it's coming from inside of me. It's versus somebody who's actually taken the journey, they've done the hike, and they could also give additional, insights too on where to stop, where to go pee, at rest stops or something, where to shower. Anyway, point is, it's coming from inside a real place of knowledge. And I was just thinking about what we're doing right now is so precious to me, because oftentimes when asked about like what is animating Chinese history, you often get, an encyclopedic answer, or somebody has a book that they've read that gives them an opinion, but very few people really take the time to read Mencius himself or the Analects or the classics, which as we're seeing, there's like such rich, by just going to the firsthand writings, we're finding such rich history, that's being referenced in what appeared to be on the surface just a philosophical document. And you're like, wait a minute, this is more than that. And this is somebody who actually was in the center of historical processes, policy, and everything that shaped the world we live in. And that got me thinking a little bit about what Jerry was saying about biographies and autobiographies. And I had once had a book of Christopher Columbus when I was a kid, and I liked the book. It celebrated Christopher Columbus. And then I got older, and I started, getting a bit more politically astute, and I started hating Columbus because I was being given an understanding that he was a very bad person who destroyed the indigenous population and all these terrible things. And I threw away the book. What formerly I had a very positive relationship to when I was younger, I had a very poisonous relationship to. I hated the book. Every time I saw it, I got rid of it. And then I began doing a bit more research later on. And somebody had given me, somebody said, actually, you know what? It wasn't Christopher Columbus who was to blame. It was there were many injustices done by the Spanish and the Portuguese, and a lot of evil was done, but it's wrong to blame Columbus, who was always trying to fight against this. He had a more noble intention. And I said, well, prove it. How do you know that? And they said, well, read his travel logs, read his diaries, read his thoughts. And then I found the book, which I at a used bookstore, and I bought the collection of all of his travel logs and his diaries. And sure enough, I started seeing that this is a very deep, profound human being who had these very beautiful ideas and he certainly was very angry at the evil that had been done in the name of Spain and the cause. He had a very different idea. So now I started regretting having thrown away my book. But it's just like by reading firsthand writings, you start it just and so few people do, right? Like they're out of print. There hasn't been a new print of Christopher Columbus's original writings in decades. They just stopped doing it because now everybody just wants to refer to expert books and opinions rather than just read firsthand sources, which would change everything.
I'm glad you've changed your mind on Columbus.
It was a long one. That was not easy.
Yes, well, especially today, there's a major attack against him by the revisionist historians.
Well, we have a statue of Columbus down the street from our house where we live, and every few weeks they have to go in and clean off the paint. Somebody throws red paint and blood on him, so it's like a regular thing.
But that's the problem of talented person being used by powerful man. Okay, it's a little bit like Mencius. If he did not manage to create a school which transmitted the original text till today, he would be portrayed as a villain in the official annals.
Good point. That's interesting. Huh. That's an interesting hypothesis.
Well, that's the problem of the Matthew. It's you, the expert on it. Okay, it's the problem of the Rhodes Foundation, the Rhodes Scholarship. Okay, it's a way to attract talented people, but those talents would be used for the intentions, keyword, for the intentions of powerful men. And all talented men are not necessarily capable to be the creator of a school that would transmit his true and original thinking. As in the case of Confucius, Mencius, or Plato, etc.
Right. That's so important, to create institutions that can transcend individual lives, that could carry on the intention. That's
yes, but it's a very Chinese thing, that scholars and intellectuals would create secret societies that would transmit their true thinking through the centuries and millennia, amidst the turmoils of geopolitical changes.
Do you have examples of my studies have been focused a lot more obviously on Western conspiratorial history and institutions created via secret societies and what have you that are they're accessible. A lot of people think it's impossible to investigate them because they don't write things down or make them public, but it actually, we've discovered that there is a way to investigate such matters fairly well, maybe not with absolute certainty, but you can get a good picture at least of what happens. Do you have any insights of negative institutions, secret societies that have existed in Chinese deep history that continue into our present era? Or
here I'm a little bit biased because I know more about good institutions in the Chinese world that have been in hiding. Okay, for example, well, the British Empire, for the bad side. Okay, the British Empire manipulated many triads in Hong Kong or even in the West. Okay, they wouldn't give for, and even using paradoxical manipulations. Okay, in Hong Kong, there were gangsters and triads organized under the pretension of restoring the dignity of China, but they would be given money by the British Empire in order to create havoc in Hong Kong, for example. Okay, and even with the yellow umbrella thing in 2014, the National Endowment for Democracy gave money to Hong Kong hooligans to act like precisely hooligans who they are, causing havoc in Hong Kong and breaking things in the kind of small parliament in Hong Kong, for example. And those triads or gangster organization often will be useful idiots because they think that they are restoring the Chinese dignity, and they are only being used to offer an image of Chinese hooligans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But on the positive side, on the transition between the Qin to the Han, there were a period of 10 years where the true noble-minded Confucian scholars went into hiding in the countryside, and they were being hidden by peasants or by landlords favorable to them, waiting for the restoration of the new order. And they didn't know that it would happen as quickly as 10 years later, because in their mind, they were preparing to hide for decades, if not for centuries.
Wow. Yeah.
But destiny gave them their chance after 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
I'm sure that after the suppression of the academy, of the Platonic Academy in 529, I think so, by Justinian, I'm sure there were Platonic scholars going to Constantinople, for example, and preserving the Platonic tradition till its rediscovery by Cosmo di Medici, I think, in 1420 something.
Yeah, that's some work. I'd really love to see somebody do that work. I have not encountered that, but you must be correct. You absolutely must be correct. The all the way through the 400s, 500s, 600s, ancient Greek writing and was very widespread, and certainly these scholars must have been very active in the Byzantine Empire. I mean, I often just think of the negative side of the Byzantium Empire, but I forget that there were also that was a repository for the greatest manuscripts of the ancients, and certainly there must have been positive things and positive individuals and networks that were active keeping the tradition alive. And I've never encountered that research yet. If you see anything on that, Quan or Jerry, let me know. I'd love to read more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the
But
way,
anyway,
are you working on a PhD thesis or anything, or just your interest? I mean, your research is just your interest, or it's about a PhD thesis or something?
but Yong Hong.
I mean,
Yong Hong.
Matthew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
me?
but I want to be a bit rude here, but I want to say to Yong Hong that Matthew is a distinguished author of Unknown History of Canada and
Voila.
the Clash of the Two Americas. And
Voila.
he wrote many outstanding articles on philosophy and geopolitics. That's the hallmark of Matthew's articles, that geopolitical events are always seen with the light of philosophy.
Now you know why I call myself more like a Canadian. I'm so straightforward. You know?
Oh, that's
Like I could be, yeah. So sorry, I should have read more about you before I asked.
That's great. No, that's great, and thank you for the kind description, Quan. I appreciate that.
No,
yeah,
I'm perfectly sincere. I'm perfectly sincere, Matthew, and I'm being rude by interrupting you again. But I want to stress that just yesterday he sent to Strategic Culture Foundation an outstanding article on how the new multipolar alliance will break the rules of the oligarchy. I will send the article to you. Sorry, Matthew, for interrupting you.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no, I have no PhD. It's just curiosity. That's it. Yeah.
Oh, it's enthusiasm. Matt.
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm.
Right. Yes.
Enthusiasm.
Now I know how ignorant I am about history. Mhm.
No, honestly, that puts you in a much, I think, better place than you realize, because a lot of the people who appear to know the most about history actually, you'll find, have the most useless understanding. It's like people who have like memorized maps so much and they're so detailed on the map that they are incapable of actually navigating themselves through the topography of a region, which has very little bearing to the map, because the map is created by people who don't want them to know the truth of history. So you spend years and years getting your master's and PhD in history, removing yourself further and further from ever having real knowledge of what you're thinking about. Whereas if you just go at it pure with no assumptions, right? Like you have no assumptions that you know things you don't know, you're much more able to organically get a more useful understanding. It's like somebody learning, I had a friend of mine who was telling me he had learned the guitar badly, and he'd been playing for many, many years, but using very bad methods, bad techniques. And he found a classical guitarist, a teacher that he began seeing. And he said there were other students with him, and they were accelerating at such a fast rate. And at first he thought, oh, I'm going to be great because I've already mastered the guitar. I just need to develop better techniques. And he's like, these other kids were all going so much faster than him because he had to unlearn all of the bad techniques, which took so much effort, and then finally reconstruct himself almost afresh. Whereas everybody else, they were just like going straight at it with the right technique and learning well. So all that to say, don't get yourself down. You're in a better place than you realize.
I'm not in a better place. I'm not in a worse place. I'm just in an equal place. I think we all have our different perspectives.
Sure.
Like what you just said, it's easy. I mean, through academia or through research, that we can build up so-called mind map, right? Mind map regarding knowledge and regarding skills and regarding, like methodologies. But for me, it's more about the heart map, like the heart-to-heart connection. For example, when I read history, that's why I got connected with the methods that Jerry used to write his books, because it's about people. So for me, I mean, history could mean two things. That one, like if I were the person, I were in the similar social context, how would have I made my choice, like my life choice? So for me, I find that amazing. For example, if I were Mencius with the king, right, with the, like the temptations of rank, wealth, and everything, right? So how would I have made my life choice? So that can, that can transcend time and space. That can transcend the national boundaries. I mean, it's universal when it comes to human nature. Be it a Canadian or be it a Chinese, that's why we can have this kind of connections tonight, regardless of the cultural background that we are from. So, and also social context always get changed. So this also reminds me to what Martin Luther King says, that people should not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of their personality. So for me, the same thing, like people should not be judged by the actions or by the choices they choose under certain social context, but by the human nature or the qualities they demonstrated in those social contexts. So so that's why I find this learning and with this group so Interesting. I'm borrowing Guan's word. He always liked to use interesting. That's not my favorite word, but yeah. So thank you. Now I know that I'm speaking to 3 scholars. So I'm no scholars, I'm no historians, but I am a true person. Yeah, that's all I can say. Yeah.
On mute. So that's just that's the highest thing I think we could all aspire to, is to be a true human beings, first and foremost. Guys, it's been a pleasure as always, spiritually, intellectually enlivening. So thank you all. And I will catch you all next Wednesday for, I suppose we're getting into part 3 of Mencius. And then before that, Anton Chaikin will be doing the Sunday lecture on American history, and his new book is coming out. So he's going to, I think, do a bit of a teaser on some of that content, maybe going into JFK and John F. Kennedy's fight against the empire. So I'll send out the Zoom link like usual around Friday night sometime. So
Matthew,
yes.
may I give a suggestion?
Yes.
Yong Hong, can you send your email to Matthew that he can send you the invitation for the Mencius reading?
Why don't you forward my email address to Matthew?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I will send it to
thank
Matthew.
you.
So you will be part of the group as a natural member and not through me. It's better.
Thank you, but I'm no historian again. Okay, I could be very ignorant and I could be very straightforward. I hope that you don't mind, and thank you for your understanding and acceptance.
Absolutely. Thank you for accepting us, and as we all strive to be better human beings. So that's good.
Thank you.
Right. Ciao.
Ciao.
Have a good night.